Hello. I look very different because my hair is drying, but also my blonde fringe is gone. That's why I look like this. I don't like it, so... This is going to be a video for the gays who love classics, and I'm just going to be ranking all of the complete novels that E.M. Forster wrote. The way I rank these, we're going to go from like least enjoyed to favourite. And the first one is very obvious for me, and that's A Passage to India, which is about like a bunch of English people who go to India, and there's like some complicated dynamics between them, and marriage and romance and will they won't they kind of thing. There's also kind of like a ghostly presence and like relationships with the people who actually are Indian and like live there and stuff and live under colonial rule. I think it's sort of like it was released in 1920s, but it's kind of representing an India from like the earlier than that, I would say, because I think Forster went in like 1913, but it just took him like 10 years to write, or at least he didn't write it for 10 years or whatever. This novel I think is sometimes by academics like described as like a post-colonial novel, or you know, an anti-colonial novel, and whilst I think in comparison with some of the like propaganda for the empire that was going around at the time and before, maybe it does kind of depart kind of starkly from it, but I don't think it departs as much as people sort of talk about it like it does, or to the extent that it would actually be deemed as something post-colonial or anti-colonial. I do think that there are some instances or like examples of like kind of queer kinships between people, a kind of like dissident friendship, which has also been theorised by a bunch of like post-colonial critics about Forster's work and other authors' work from around the same time. But yeah, like it's just, I didn't like it. The next is one I've spoken about more recently. And that's The Longest Journey. And this is from 1907. Yeah, it's about this guy called Ricky, and it's kind of about his like adolescence into adulthood, his marriage, his friendships, homosocial like bonds and relationships. Like it's very gay without being actually gay, and then like Ricky has this disability. There's a lot of kind of like eugenic description around that. Like I really didn't enjoy this. So yeah, but I did speak a little bit more about it in like an update, I think. I do also think that like this has a lot of the things that Forster goes on to do really well, or like much better in, for example, Howard's End and also Maurice, and specifically around like the representation of working class characters, specifically like the working class men, because I don't think there were many working class women in Forster's work actually, as well as just like doing women characters much better than there's like one main woman in this, and I feel like she gets the short end of the stick. Whilst talking about this one, I did also want to mention how like now I basically have two full like copies of Forster's works, because I saw these in a charity shop and I didn't get them, and then I left, and then I messaged my friend Emma, who loves E.M. Forster and obviously is queer, and like, I mean, she kind of convinced me, but it's not like I needed convincing. I was already like, should I go back? So she told me to go back and get them, and obviously I did. Yeah, so I have a bunch of those, so I'll also show you those as I go through. So this is the Longest Journey one. So they have these like nice black and white drawings, and I just really like them, and I really like them as a set. The next one I would rank is Where Angels Fear to Tread, and this we're getting into like maybe I'm enjoying these books a bit more category, and this one is, I think it was his first novel, so it's also kind of just like interesting in that standpoint to read. And it's about this woman called Leela, who I think is originally a widow. She goes to Italy and then she marries a younger man there, a younger Italian, and it's kind of about like the consequences of that and what happens. There are some like definite kind of like Forsterisms in this. Obviously there's Italy, there's summer, there's like older women, there's beautiful writing still, but you know, I do think that this, again, it's like you can kind of chart where these things developed out of. There's also like obviously gay undertones as well in this, very much so. And it's got like a great title. Where Angels Fear to Tread is a great title. Yeah, I would say like this one was more of a mixed bag than like The Longest Journey, like, which I just felt like I did not enjoy. I would say there's more kind of melodrama in this than in his other works. Like I think his other works are maybe also sad, also tragic, but not in quite a kind of stylistic way. But I don't know if I would agree with that, because I read this like 2 years ago, but that's maybe how I feel right now. And then the copy that I got in this edition of Angels Fear to Tread has this lovely like gate. Now we're getting into the ones that like I actually like unreservedly. The next one is A Room with a View. It's definitely, I would say, his most famous work, partially because of the film with Helena Bonham Carter, although actually like Where Angels Fear to Tread also has a film with Helena Bonham Carter in, and so does Howard's End. She's obviously a very quintessential like looking heroine for the stories that Forster writes, or at least people think she is. Yeah, and again we've got like some similar vibes to A Room with a View, some similar themes throughout, going to Italy and falling in love. This is about specifically a young woman called Lucy Honeychurch who goes to Florence and meets this guy called George. They have a kind of like weird vibe and interaction, some might call it very romantic. Then she goes back to England and it's kind of about what happens there. There's some conflict, but I feel like it's hard to describe this without spoiling it, at the same time as like everybody already knows about the story because it is really, really famous. And as this cover, which is a newer cover, would demonstrate, there's some stuff about music, which actually is also something that like continues through a bunch of his work. But I think this is a very beautiful novel. I think that it doesn't rate higher for me because I feel like it's maybe more surface level, just like a bit, than the two that are my favourite. I don't think it's superficial though, I just mean in comparison with those two. But I also do think that the figure of like Lucy Honeychurch's cousin, Charlotte, is a kind of like underlooked at and an interesting figure, and definitely one which actual spinster would be interested in. I think a lot of people probably do talk about this being a good place to start with Forster, and I wouldn't disagree. I think it's also kind of short. Also, like, the name Lucy Honeychurch is just like such a classic name. And then this is the nice edition, which is of course of A Room with a View. Although I think it's maybe my least favourite of the designs of that series. Okay, so the moment of truth. I decided to make this video and I hadn't fully decided, or at least like, yeah, I hadn't fully decided what order I would put the last two novels in. And to some degree I'm still undecided, but I'm gonna go with one way that feels like right, but is something that could change in the years to come. And it's partially because one of these books has like about like 12 years ahead of the other, of it being like one of my favourite books of all time. And it is also a book that I reread and I reread and I reread when I first read it because I was studying it. So yeah, I'm going with one way, and if I change my mind, like, I'll make an addendum later. Okay, so in second place we have Maurice, which again is one I've talked about recently on this channel, and it's a beautiful gay novel about growing up and love and coming into yourself and trying to be free of heteronormativity and capitalism. And yeah, it is very just exquisite. I think one of the more like sensual books of Forster's, although I do think that he's quite like a sensual writer, even if he's maybe thought of as like prim and proper. I think he writes, like, I think some of his books kind of come down to that like 2005 Pride and Prejudice clip, like the only good part about that film, where Mr. Darcy like hands Elizabeth Bennet into the carriage and then, you know, they touch hands and then it like goes into a shot of him being like with his hand. I'll try find it. That was a very bad description. Yeah, I think a lot of his interactions maybe boil down to that. And I think it comes to a head in this. I think something that makes me quite sad about this novel really is that like the editions that I have, like, it actually doesn't have one of Maurice, and that's because it was only published in 1971 because, you know, Forster couldn't publish it when he was alive, and that's really pretty sad. These, I believe, these editions are from the 60s, I think, so, you know, they're a decade early. It's pretty sad. I've talked about this book a couple times on my channel already, so I think I won't go into any more detail, but it is a really wonderful book, and I am really looking forward to rereading it and to maybe re-ranking it, maybe not, but either way just like enjoying its generosity and poeticism and loving kindness. Yeah. And then my number one rank, and this has been one of the novels that I've said is one of my favourite books of all time, like I said, for 10, 12 years now. Wait, no, it's wrong, I've been doing maths wrong. 9 years, coming up to 10 years, well, that's not how maths works. And that's Howard's End. And this one was from 1910, just to check that. 1910, and it's about the Schlegel sisters, who are German-English sisters in London. It's about their interactions with this other family called the Wilcoxes, who are very different from them. They're kind of like middle-class socialists, somewhat bohemian, artistic, literary, that kind of thing. The Wilcoxes are kind of like new money, basically. They're very, is Philistine the right word? They don't believe in art or liberty, really. They definitely are like capitalist. They're just pretty different. It's about their interactions, and it starts with these amazing telegrams that the younger sister of the Schlegel sisters, Helen, sends to Meg, who's the older one, while she's visiting the Wilcoxes in their kind of like, it's not like family home, it's like Ruth Wilcox's, like their mother's house, basically kind of called Howard's End, and her experiences there. And her experiences there inform the rest of the novel, inform everybody in the novel. It's a book about miscommunication, about marriage, about confounding decisions, about love, about money and social and economic relationships. There's also this other character as well who does come in, called Leonard Bass, who is basically the only kind of like working class character, and whilst I don't think he gets treated particularly well, like narratively, I do think he gets treated with much more complexity and sensitivity than the character who's called, I think, Stephen in The Longest Journey. This is actually the edition that I read for my A-levels, with just so much, like, you can't really see, but like it's a lot. I got to reread it as well as part of like a course I took for my masters. That was also very enjoyable. And yeah, it's one of those books that like is very character driven. Wouldn't say it's particularly about plot, although I do think it is about moments and the effect that moments can have on the rest of your life. I don't think that you get like all the answers in this novel. I think that some people might find it frustrating, but in a way I think that kind of makes it better. I like that. It makes you think about it more long term. Yeah, and I love Meg. I do think it's funny they put this like beautiful, serene woman on the cover when like she's literally explicitly described as being ugly. Big fan of Meg. Also a big fan of Ruth Wilcox. Big fan of Howard's End and Howard's End as a novel as well. I really like this edition. I think it's really cute. Like I like it a lot with their great dresses. I do actually have this as well in the 60s editions, which is a collection of short stories, which I haven't read. I was going to try and read it for this, but then I was like, well, I'm ranking the novel, so it's fine. So that is the thing I think I'll be reading next from him. But yeah, I just decided I didn't need to have read it for this video. So there we go. Those are the books. Definitely let me know your ranking order. I'd love to know. Yes. Thank you so much for watching, and yeah, let me know your thoughts. I also do feel like it was maybe low-key a controversial decision to keep Howard's End like at my #1 spot, so let me know what you think about that. I think a bunch of people won't agree with me, but I'm just not ready to let go of it being there for now, and I do think I'd like to reread Maurice at least once to figure out if I want to put it in my #1 spot. But I probably won't do that for a while, which is good. I don't want to do it for a while. Like, I need space to really deeply process it. Cool. I think that's everything I have to say. I hope you're having a nice day when you see this, and hopefully next time you see me I will have a bleach fringed again. Bye!